Just as we will never tell pensioners to tighten their belts again and again. Madam Speaker, this Prime Minister sees pensioners as a burden to the budget. Labor rejects this. Labor believes that Australians who've worked hard all their lives, who've paid taxes all their lives, if lucky have a humble family home, have earned the right to a dignified and secure retirement. Yeah. Pensioners should not have to worry about whether or not they can afford to put on the heating, visit the doctor, buy the grandkids a treat, take the dog to the vet. Let's be clear, the age pension is not a king's ransom. It's a modest sum, barely $20,000 a year. The reforms introduced by Labor guarantee the pension keeps pace with the cost of living. If the Prime Minister's pension cuts had been in place for the last 4 years, today pensioners would be at least $1,500 worse off. The Prime Minister's breach of trust with pensioners isn't just breaking a promise he made before the last election. He is breaking a promise that Australia made with our fellow citizens 40 and 50 years ago, at the start of their working life. A contract that, if they worked hard and made a contribution, the nation would help look after them in their old age. This Prime Minister's cuts trespass against the nation's covenants with pensioners. This Prime Minister's lies and broken promises hurt every generation of Australians. Why should the sons and daughters of pensioners worried about their parents' quality of life have to worry about this budget too? Tonight I make this solemn pledge to Australia's pensioners. Labor will not surrender the security of your retirement. We will fight for a fair pension and we will prevail. Yeah. This government's failure to plan for the needs of older Australians is not just a problem for those currently on the age pension. This Prime Minister and this Treasury should stop haranguing Australians about working till they're 70, especially if their only plan for Australians is to work longer and harder and retire with less. I've spent my adult life representing the people who do the real heavy lifting, the tradespeople, the labourers, the cleaners, the nurses, the Australians who make a living with skilled hands and strong backs. Many of them started work at 15 and 16. Don't force them to work till 70. Empowering Australian workers to save for their retirement is important. Labor wants Australia to have the world's best retirement system, not the world's oldest retirement age. And in this budget, the government continues to target the retirement savings of all Australians. This Abbott government cut superannuation, another broken promise, more pensioners reliant on a pension in the future. As a minister, I move legislation in this parliament to raise superannuation from 9 to 12% and reduce taxation on the modest superannuation contributions of Aussies who earn $37,000 or less. Yet one of the first acts of this government was to abolish Labor's low-income superannuation contribution. What a cowardly raid on the retirement savings of 3.5 million low-income earners. Two-thirds of these hurt were women who had moved in and out of the workforce to start and raise a family. How can this Prime Minister believe it is okay to pay multi-millionaires $50,000 that they don't need, yet rob the retirement savings of over 2 million women who earn less than that in a whole year? Prime Minister, can you not see how unfair your policies are? Labor believes that every Australian should be able to find good and fulfilling jobs with decent paying conditions in productive, profitable and competitive enterprises. But for Australians under 30 who are looking for work, this budget offers no hope. It offers despair, it offers poverty, it offers no plan for jobs. Prime Minister, where is your plan for jobs? Arguably, the changes to New Start are perhaps the single most heartless measure in this brutal budget. They sentence young people to a potentially endless cycle of poverty when they should be getting a hand to find a job. This is a classic blame-shifting, cost-shifting measure that will put the price of unemployment onto Australian families. Prime Minister, how will people under 30 looking for work, how are they supposed to survive on absolutely nothing? These are purely ideological changes that go to the very core of this Prime Minister's character. They contradict every piece of expert advice. This Prime Minister's vicious, victim-blaming policy will create a lost generation of Australians shut out of the workforce, and Labor will have no part of it. Yeah. Madam Speaker, Australia does not have a budget emergency as the government claims, but it has a budget task. And that task, in the face of declining terms of trade and lower nominal income, is to change and reconfigure the budget's trajectory, to over time make certain that the combination and influences of Commonwealth spending and Commonwealth revenue come together to reduce the government's call on national savings. In short, Madam Speaker, to make our national budget sustainable, but make it sustainable in a fair and reasonable way. And why is this so particularly important? Because the budget supports and needs to support large numbers of dependent people, as does families on modest incomes, as it must on schools and health. This budget has always needed a balance in its imposition on incomes, the contribution of companies and those expenditures which underpin us in a civil society, indeed I believe as a great social democracy. Labor has always held to these precepts. This is the kind of thoughtful responsibility that I subscribe to, recognising what needs to be done. But this is not the framework that this government has adopted. It's walking away from this kind of balance. This budget is designed to change the essential compact of the Australian society. It is conservatism taking it up to consensus, tugging away at the very struts that have held us together as a good and prosperous nation. This opposition will support reasonable and balanced remedial budgetary measures, but we will never support the conscious development of an underclass. This is a budget that would seek to demolish the pillars of Australian society: Medicare, education for all, a fair pension, full employment. The very things that this Prime Minister promised not to touch are the first casualties of his fabrications: new and higher taxes. This is the budget of a Prime Minister and a government who wish to tear down everything that Australians have built up. By contrast, Labor invests, Labor educates, Labor believes in an Australia writ large. We believe that economic growth comes from extending opportunity. We believe in a prosperous Australia, prosperity for everyone who works and prosperity which works for everyone. An Australia where your Medicare card, not your credit card, guarantees you access to quality health care. An Australia where the National Disability Insurance Scheme is a reality for people with disability and the people who love them, not a scapegoat for complaints about spending. We believe that science and innovation should be at the heart of national policy, central to our prosperity. We believe in an Australia where small business can grow and thrive. We believe in an Australia that still makes things. Australia with quality infrastructure, including the best digital infrastructure. An Australia that is closing the gap, extending opportunities to its first Australians. Labor believes in an Australia that cares for its environment and takes the science of climate change seriously. Where multiculturalism is celebrated as a social and economic good, not treated as sport for bigots and ideologues. An Australia that is a good global citizen, confident and engaged with the opportunities of the Asian century. An Australia ready for the future and optimistic about the future, investing in the future. This Prime Minister and this Treasurer, they talk a lot about the freedom of the market, deregulating and liberating. Of course you can get rid of fairness and leave people to fend for themselves. That is a kind of freedom. Tonight I say to Australians there is another freedom. The freedom of integrity and the freedom of respect. The freedom that gives every person dignity and the right to be treated equally. A freedom of compassion and respect that gives individuals the opportunity to fulfil their potential. That's the freedom that we believe in. This budget undermines that freedom. This budget weakens it. This budget tears at the fabric of our country. Madam Speaker, on Tuesday the Treasurer quoted from Robert Menzies' Forgotten People. But the government forgot a lot of people on budget night. They are the Australians I am speaking on behalf of tonight and the Australians that I am speaking to tonight. The government forgot you in its budget. and they have forgotten what makes this country great. It forgot opportunity. It forgot the reward for effort. It forgot the fair go. Well, Labor hasn't forgotten. We still believe in fairness. We still believe in an Australia that includes everyone, that helps everyone, that lets everyone be their best, that leaves no one behind. This is the Australia that the Prime Minister's budget has forgotten, and it is the Australia that Labor will always fight for. If you want an election, try us. If you think Labor is too weak, if you think that Labor is too weak, bring it on. But remember, it is never about you or I, Prime Minister. It's about the future of our nation and the well-being of the Australian people.